let's do this. So, a couple hours ago, I uploaded a video called What If Carnage, you can't tell, but I'm actually holding a Carnage toy, it's epic, was in Spider-Man 3. Go check that out for some more context. Because this is going to be a sequel to that, a literal sequel. So where they go off those events. So not the original Spider-Man 3 events. No, we're not going, no. So what if Spider-Man 4 happened? So what's going to happen is that Spider-Man will be low at its low, like we ended last time, where he's really lost it. He's lost it physically and mentally. Because he lost his best friend. And he barely managed to save Eddie Brock. But what will actually happen is that Eddie will basically have to smart to the symbiote. And he will be able to break out of jail quite easily. So he'd escape. And then the cops were trying to shoot him. He'd hide behind a wall and record a video as then he was shot to death. Anyway, that video appeared on the news as they had enough time to send it, and it would reveal Spider-Man's identity as Peter Parker. Peter would say, no, this can't be happening. As he'd look in horror, everyone was going against him, saying, you can save Harry from death. You're a monster. And you couldn't save the criminal. You really are a monster. Peter would say, no, I wanted to save them, but I couldn't. And Peter was just attacked for not being a real hero. And he tried to use his webs and he'd actually escape the crowd. But then something crazy would happen. Peter would arrive on a building where a couple were there. And they'd try and charge him, but they'd be stabbed in the back by actual Vulture. Peter would look behind the stab and he'd see that Vulture was there. He'd be confused as he was tackled. He'd fall down and he'd hit the ground. MJ would be attacked for being associated with Spider-Man. Peter would be able to get her out the way and he'd be webbing away trying to get out earlier. He'd be getting chased by Vulture. Everything was happening at the same time. He'd jump and escape into a sewer, which then we'd hear a voice. We'd see Dr. Kirk Connors and Peter would say, what are you doing down here? And then Kirk Connors would inject himself and the lizard would be born. And he'd go to finally kill Spider-Man off, finishing the job. But what would happen is Peter would dodge it. MJ would actually punch the lizard in the face as Peter webbed it, and he'd actually see it with MJ on top of a building. And he'd know that nowhere was safe now. He'd web home and he'd arrive, and then Aunt May would say, why didn't you tell me? And it would just be crazy. Peter would have to deal with all this at the same time. And he'd explain how he didn't want to tell anyone, because if he accidentally killed someone and it wasn't his fault, he would get all the blame for that. Even if it wasn't his fault, no one would believe him. She'd understand where he was coming from. And he'd talk about what happened with all the previous villains, and she'd be shocked. Captain Stacy would actually be against Spider-Man getting shamed, as he saved his daughter in Spider-Man 3. So what would happen is Vulture would tackle Peter. The audience would actually see Vulture as a hero, and they'd fight with Spider-Man as the Captain Stacy would point his gun saying, get off of him. He's a hero. He can save people. He failed once. Don't blame him. He'd look as Vulture tried to attack him. Peter would dodge it, and then the lizard would actually come, and they'd team up. Peter would web away if they were chasing him. Peter would get a cure, and he'd use it on the lizard when he wasn't suspecting it. How he got the cure was MJ was working on it, and they got it at the right moment. MJ would be stolen by Vulture as Peter would use his webs, getting up as he saw Vulture throw MJ. Peter would kick Vulture as he saved MJ, using his webs to make sure she was fine. Captain Stacy would make an announcement about how Gwen was saved, and Gwen would even back this up. So Spider-Man would be seen as an actual hero again. Vulture realized now his plan was going to ruin. The police officers who killed Eddie would also back him up, saying the fact that Peter didn't saved Eddie, but they knew he was a danger, so they shot him. Vulture would grab MJ and Gwen, and he'd get to the top of a building as Peter was climbing up. He'd arrive and he'd see as Vulture had thrown Mary Jane and Gwen. Peter wouldn't know what to do, so he'd use his webs, and Gwen would actually land on it, and now Peter had to save MJ. He'd jump and go to save her, and he'd catch her, and then they'd start to fall as the Vulture came and stabbed MJ. Peter would say no as he kicked Vulture in the face. He webbed MJ in case she had any sign of life, but MJ was dead. Vulture would cut the web that Gwen was on, and Peter would actually save her, fighting with Vulture, and Vulture would go to stab Spider-Man, but he dodged it. As he tried to fight Spider-Man, he jumped and they got into a huge free-fall fight, but Vulture would tackle him as he fell and hit the ground. Peter would try and use his web, but Vulture wouldn't want his help, so he'd cut it and he'd die. At the end of the fourth movie, Gwen and Spider-Man would actually be dating instead of it being Peter and MJ, because Peter had no one left, and they've dated in the past. So now, MJ was gone. They were dating again. We cut to Peter's narration as he was talking about how he could have saved the universe, but he failed. He saved MJ once, twice, heck, 3 times, but couldn't save her the 4th time. We cut to Peter's final swing, and then he'd given up on everything. He wouldn't know what to do, and it would end. Post-credit scene, Lizard would revive himself. And that's where we're going to end What If Spider-Man 4 happened. So, yeah. Hope you enjoyed. Woo! Yeah. So this was fun fanfiction to actually make, as I thought a surprise MJ death would really be shocking, and I feel like it would help as Peter would have saved her even in the 3rd time with Harry's help, but he realized that just because he saved her once, just because he saved her twice, just because he saved her 3 times doesn't mean she's safe for good, and Peter would learn that knowing he had to protect Gwen. And actually now he would keep him, since everyone knew he was Peter Parker, he knew he needed to do something. So what he did was he distanced himself from Gwen to make it seem like he wasn't doing it in case the villain saw it. So yeah, and eventually he'd get back together with her whenever he got the chance and they were out of town. So yeah.